Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Ethics for All Live. I'm Shilpi Agarwal, your host. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest. She is the authority on autonomous vehicles. That always gets to me. She's an artificial intelligence instructor for Stanford Continuing Studies and the CEO of IoT Disruptions. Please welcome Sudha Jamte. Yay!
Thank you.
Hello, Sudha.
Hello. Thank you for having me over. It's fun. I've been watching all your weekly podcast and posts about data ethics. It's a very important topic. So thank you for having me here. I'm used to talking to people who are excited about autonomous vehicles. And I teach a course called Business of Autonomous Vehicle Data online at Driverless World School. And this is the first time I'm going to be talking about data ethics and autonomous vehicle in the same session. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, because there's just so much data with autonomous vehicles these days, right? So, I mean, it's not a topic of data ethics. You can't miss that with the AI models and all the data that's going in there. So, yeah, definitely. So,
Yeah.
I'd like to also, I would like to welcome all our guests. Hello, Susanna.
Hi.
Hi. And we will have 5 minutes for Q&A. So, keep your questions ready for Sudha. Uh, and we'll have a fun and interactive session today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So I really like to always start with understanding my guests and their personal journey. I feel that gives me an insight into where they are and what they are doing, but also so much into how they got started. So tell us how you got started into researching autonomous vehicles.
So I come from a engineering computer science background, but worked on the business side, product management, and then I moved to mobile analytics most of my career. So in my last corporate job, I was at eBay, heading mobile analytics with an amazing team, and they're all like data scientists and business intelligence analysts in various companies in the Silicon Valley and the globe today. And we were looking at mobility from the phone. And we used to have this fun, passionate discussion about how mobility is not restricted to the phone and it is going to move with the customer. It carries the context and it's going to go with the user. And the next immediate thing was IoT and wearables with Fitbits. So I left eBay about 5 years back on a sabbatical thinking I'm going to write a book and go back. So this IoT Disruptions name you see is my brand because my first book was called IoT Disruptions. Then I wrote one on IoT Disruptions 2020, and then it went on from there. I was so obsessed about IoT, and I realized that the car was another IoT, which means it's a connected device. I mean, car people don't like it being called a device, but I was looking at it as it is connected, it is sending data. And because of my analytics mindset, I love data. I understand the power of data, but it is also something like what you are looking at, that, there is so much ethics that you have to look at to do it right. And so my journey started out from being in corporate, focused on analytics, working for big corporation, making money with the data for somebody else, and then looking at IoT and then looking at the car as an IoT. And then I realized this is bigger because now the car is going to carry your context, and there is so much more that needs to be done. So I ended up researching and I chase cars, and I I do that a lot. And we are in California with 60 self-driving car pilots all around us. And so I ended up teaching a course in Stanford called Business of Self-Driving Car. Again, I realized it's not just the self-driving car, it's bigger than the self-driving car.
True.
And so I wrote this book called 2030, The Driverless World, and then my journey began, and I'm still constantly in research mode. I'm teaching, talking, writing, but I'm researching because it's moving continuously.
And I'm guessing you haven't gone back to eBay yet.
I am not going back to a corporate job. Yes, this has been exciting because there's so much to learn and so much to contribute, and it's very exciting time to be alive, I would say, and to be in tech, to understand the power, and the other side of tech is scary. But so we have a responsibility. I feel responsible to do more. And it's not just me writing, talking. I teach this amazing group of professional adults who want to pivot their career into new technology space. And so they are going to build the driverless world. So I feel I have a bigger purpose now.
I'm on the same page as you, so completely aligned with your vision there. So when Georgia Institute of Technology did a study on the accuracy of the state-of-the-art detection models, like they use in self-driving cars these days, to detect people from using a Fitzpatrick scale to detect people from different demographics and to understand if the detection models are accurate, they found that they were 5% less accurate on average for dark-skinned group people.
Yeah.
Today, when we are looking to support Black Lives Matter, are autonomous vehicles equipped to detect dark-skinned pedestrians accurately and safely, you think?
No. I'm sure you were expecting me to say something profound, but I think I'm so glad you asked that question, because the excitement of autonomous vehicle is that it's a hard problem to solve from an engineering perspective. So everybody is looking at, okay, how do we identify the pedestrian? And then it's not just the pedestrian. It is understanding where the lane is in the road and where it curves and shrubbery and any random thing that could show up. And the behavior of other human drivers when you share the road with the car is unpredictable. Though there are traffic rules, we are not very predictable beings. And so people, not even in a biased way, they are just focused on, we have big problems to solve. We have to do better computer vision and identify the pedestrian. So there was this Uber accident where the car was trained to identify a cyclist. The car, if they were driving next to the car or opposite side, the car was identified to could identify bicycles separately. It could identify people crossing. But here was a person who was taking their bike and crossing, like jaywalking, but they were not jaywalking pedestrians, jaywalking bicyclists.
They're not on their bike, they were walking the bike.
Yeah, walking the bike. Yeah. And it just threw the car off balance, because everything the car sees, it's like a toddler. You have to feed it training data. What you feed it, it's going to learn. If it didn't see it, its world is small, it doesn't know it.
True.
And chances are it will end up with an accident. So coming back to your question, we've been talking about Black Lives Matters and soul searching in technology industry, that we do not hire and help people with any, not just dark skin, Black people. Let's be
brown skin, like we are too.
And I'm sure the car might have a different, I think the car has not been trained enough, even with my kind of complexion. Yeah. And I chase enough of it, so they must know me in the training data. I'm sure.
I know you, Sudha.
I've contributed. In fact, I actually got into this autonomous vehicle chasing, not just chasing, but to track them.
Yeah.
Because it just hit me one day that I'm driving. I used to drive back home from Stanford, and the Google self-driving car, which is now called Waymo, used to drive next to me, and it was kind of immune to my presence. I was thinking, if this was a local neighborhood and I'm driving by, there would be a person who would wave at me. And the car is supposed to be training and testing for the road. What is it testing? And then it hit me, I am just training data. And then I said, if I'm going to be training data, I'm going to be the best training data, and I'm going to train this thing. And so I ended up, following them and would see, okay, how do they behave? And in construction zone, when you're on the right, you do things, and they drive very, very cautiously, right? They don't speed, they don't break any rules, that kind of thing. But coming back to the training data, there is in AI in general, there is not enough diversity, and definitely less Black people represented. And this has come in IoT in general, wearables and facial recognition and everything, that they don't have enough diversity with Black people. And so when you see any car company showing, okay, we have this autonomous vehicle driving technology, you, even in their videos, you will not see a Black person's face. And that is like so wrong. And you will not see a brown person's face also. You would just see white faces. Not to be, racist or anything here, but that is not representative of the road. And So that means that the car is not going to identify that person, and
True.
it is going to identify everybody as an object. So the chances are it is not going to hit them, but it is going to not function the way it is expected to function.
Absolutely.
And there is one technology I saw from a company from Boston called Perceptive Automata. And what they do is they identify the people by computer vision. And then they just don't say, okay, they're pedestrian, they're going to cross the road. They say, based next step, they look at the images and is the person sitting and bending and looking at a cell phone? Are they talking to each other? So when we are driving as humans, we would see two people on the road. We will not say, oh, they're going to cross the road if they're just talking to each other, right? So what they do is they go one step further, look at the expression of the person or their hand gesture and what they're doing to identify whether what is their intent. Is their intent to cross the road? So now again, if so it did not matter if they're just identifying people as objects, but and in their video they don't show a single black person. But if they do not have a black person in the training data or a brown person in the training data, it is not going to identify our intent. So whatever use cases they develop out of it, they might start with saying we'll identify whether they're going to cross the road. Later, they might develop into other use cases and say, okay, the car is driving autonomously. Now we are going to drop off somebody in an emergency in a hospital, and we want to identify the faces of the emergency person who's picking up this person. And what if they don't identify the expression of that person because they don't have that in the training data? So this has so many tentacles and it is not going in the right direction. So I'm glad we're having this conversation because this needs to stop now.
Absolutely. And one of the concerns that I've heard from researchers is also from Kate Crawford, a co-founder of the AI Now Research Institute at NYU, is that autonomous vehicle manufacturers do not allow transparency around the models and training sets that they are using. So what ethical considerations would you recommend for autonomous vehicle manufacturers?
So there are multiple stakeholders in here. The AV technology players like Waymo or Cruise, they are creating one layer of the stack that is going to enable the car to drive autonomously to identify the road. There's a whole bunch of startups called Perception, they are in the perception space, called Deep Maps and some other company, who actually give you just this technology by which the car will be able to, the car cognition piece, how the car can identify that road. That piece is perception. So the companies who are doing perception have to have enough diversity in the training data. And because they're using deep learning models, it is next to impossible because this is CNN of thousands of layers, right? So you cannot say we want it to be transparent and explainable AI and tell us how the decision was made, because it's so many combinations in so many levels of the CNN, it's not possible. Okay. So the only thing they can do is they can ensure that they have enough diversity in their staff, in people that they're training.
Yeah.
And they exist. It's not like we don't have enough diversity of people, even women, right? Even women, black people, brown people, all of us, they need to hire enough people. And then automatically you're going to ensure that you're in the training data, right? You're represented, your point of view is represented. And so I would say the easiest thing, nowadays there's a lot of open data sets from every possible tech company that is put out there. And Waymo has their open data set, whole bunch of them are out there, which is their training data they put out to just show, right? For people to learn how to build autonomous vehicle tech, and they do a lot of challenges. But the best way they can do is simply hire enough the diverse people in their engineering pool, and that will take care of everything. That's what I would say.
Yeah, so I think we are touching on two good points. One is to have really racially diverse teams, and the other is also to put weightage on the data, even if it is not from the majority. Even if it is a small portion of the training data that doesn't come from the majority, it's not an outlier that you would consider it. I think we should. I mean, it is an outlier, but we should still consider it in order to train our models better, because unless we feed that into the system, like you said, they're never going to predict the right outcomes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also if you intentionally test for it, right? The way you build AI is you take your training data and then you say, okay, I'm going to use this for training data and I'm going to use this small subset for test data. And then you go out into the field. And when you go out into the field, you keep collecting more data. So what they can do is they can hire enough Black people or a racially diverse team, as you beautifully put it. And then in the training data, they can actually consciously say, are we actually uh, supporting the general population mix in a diverse way? And so their test data set could be reflective of that.
Sure.
And so they would automatically catch it, right? That they're not able to see certain
Yes.
Skin colors and stuff. The other thing is then when they're training, they could, most of the cars I see are in Mountain View and Palo Alto. Many of our self-driving cars are in Palo Alto.
True.
Okay. And Apple, when they were testing their cars, I could see them in Cupertino. And then we are not seeing them these days, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you see a bunch in San Francisco, even within here in Silicon Valley. So I don't know whether they go to every nook and cranny. Do they go to East San Jose? Do they go to Oakland? Do they go everywhere, right? So even if they do that consciously, they will get training data. They don't need to try hard. They would get training data. And then they automatically, that's what they're doing every night, right? They're collecting the data and then they're saying, okay, now and they're testing for different functionality of software. They can just do that. But if they just collect, if they drive in enough diverse neighborhoods, that's a great start. So hire people, right? Diverse team, and then just drive in every possible neighborhood consciously, and then test for different test cases.
And even if that data is small, put weightage on it for the racially diverse.
But putting the weightage on it would be hard because then you have to, now you're letting the AI build the whole thing, and now you're going to have a human interference. Again, that could cause some biases, right? So somebody could argue that is not perfect because now it is going to be more biased towards this population set versus something else. So it's better to think of this as a machine learning optimization problem, that there is gaps in data and ensure that we feed the data, but not bring in some kind of human logic. Then you're dependent on the human in there.
Okay. That's a great point. I want to go back to that one point you mentioned, that making it transparent is very hard because there's just so many decision points that these smart cars are making per se. But what if we could at least put it out there, the algorithm, like if, this is the logic, this is what they're doing, this is why they're doing it. And in this scenario, this is how we are training them to behave. Is that possible?
It is a lot of work, but it is possible. Because it was going to take, so when Waymo publishes their open data set, they're actually thinking about object identification, corner cases, and they're saying here are 2D label data and 3D label data.
Sure.
They're not, today still the self-driving car companies, at least the ones who are building the tech, are mostly competing with each other. So it's a black box. What the Uber car is thinking and how it's going to make decision compared to how the Cruise car is going to think or make decision is a complete black box. And they're all going towards this, saying we are going to compete and we are going to be it. We are going to provide the OS in the car, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a mindset that we've had in the computer industry forever, unfortunately. But the problem with the self-driving car is so complex that it cannot be done by one company. So I'm a big fan of this federated AI concept, which is basically you build your own machine learning model. Don't tell me what your algorithm is, your data set is, or don't expose any of your customer data or your secret sauce. I will bring my own machine learning model, and then you build this federated AI, which is distributed machine learning models, which would get the best of both worlds. And so insurance industry is doing that, banking industry is doing that, because banking industry does not want to just build their own fraud model, and their competition builds a different fraud model. And it's not going to be good for them saying the competition is preventing fraud better than me, because they want to know what that algorithm by which they're preventing some fraud that they have not thought about. So they have a motivation to work together. And so I'm a big fan, and I want to call people if they're working on this or they're interested in working on this, to build federated AI in the car space, in the autonomous vehicle space. And we've been talking, I think Porsche is doing that in the car space in a pilot mode. I have not seen many other car companies doing that yet. And it's not just the autonomous vehicle, how the car sees the road, which is the car cognition piece. Mm-hmm. The beauty or the power of this whole AV space is the car has to become connected, and then it shares data, does some processing in the edge and then sends it to the cloud, and that's how it is communicating. And the car is so there is a lot more data in the car. Yeah. And there are two other areas that comes with that, right? In terms of applications, right? One is there is this whole concept of V2X. The car is going to communicate with city infrastructure, with the traffic lights, with the dealer network, and anything out in the cloud. The other thing is the car is going to communicate to other cars. So the whole V2X is one area of application development. The other is the inside of the car is not going to be a replacement of the horse buggy that we've been stuck with for 100 years. It's time for it to change. And so there are concepts that we hear from various car companies about voice in the car, AR in the car, VR in the car, that kind of thing, right? Even in Australia, they have this, in Sydney, they have traffic cameras looking inside the car and seeing whether the person is texting and driving, and they'll straight away send a ticket. And they're doing computer vision, same thing what I was talking about the other startup doing, where they're looking at the person, and then they're looking whether they are they've got a cell phone and they're bending, and they're in the driver's seat, and then it says, okay, now you're texting and driving. And again, I'm sure if they don't have enough diversity, or it's going to mess up, and there is going to be bias in AI, and it is going to target certain people, even unconsciously, right? So that two areas needs us to think about it like any other AI, that we need diversity. Yeah, and remove the bias, unconscious bias in the data.
This is fascinating conversation. We are talking to Sudha Jamte. I have a ton of more questions for you, but I want to pause for a second for our attendees, Susanna and Ananya. If you guys have any live questions you want to ask to Sudha.
I have 3 questions. I don't know if you have time for all of them, but let's.
Awesome.
So one of them is the privacy rights of the people inside the cabin of the car, and the privacy rights of the pedestrians, because the car is also recording the outside. Yeah. So what do you think about that, and where do you think are the limits for that? And maybe if we have time, then I will ask the other two.
Okay, that's a fantastic question. So today, there are all the ones that are like doing computer vision and looking at people from the outside. I mean, inside the cabin of the car, has not been deployed as an app. And it is not just computer vision that it physically looks at us. The car has all the parts of the car are connected. So there are digital twins in the car, which is actually tracking all the parts of the car. And if the brake pad is supposed to decay, and say the life of a brake pad is 2 years, and by using the digital twin, the car maker can say that it is going to have a wear and tear faster, then they are actually tracking that. So that translates to driving behavior. And they could say, we can actually give you better service. So in my business of self-driving, in the business of autonomous vehicle data class, we go through this multiple use cases of what kind of applications can you build, and how do you build the digital twin in the car, and go do product management with it, or business management with it, that kind of thing. But it's a privacy invasion if you look at it that way. So today the car companies are not exposing that data and offering services without the consent of the person, because the law on that is not very clear. So what they're doing is they will get your permission. So insurance companies, Progressive gives you a dongle that you can put, and they say, hey, you can put this dongle, we'll watch how you're driving, and we'll give you better rates because you're a good driver. And it turns out that they might not be a good driver, and they might end up, getting worse rates, and then they would drop off from the service, right? But when you purchase the dongle, set it up, somewhere you're signing a fine print saying, yes, I'm ready to be tracked. So driver behavior, and then all our emotions in the car, even voice. When I'm using voice with any voice assistant or in the car, it could actually identify it could identify me by voice. Eventually you can develop a voice signature, right? I heard from this company called UIB that they have developed this algorithm by which they can track coughing sounds, and they can see whether a person has COVID.
Oh,
I mean, it's mind blowing. And the thing with all this AI is there is power to the AI, and then there is the downside of privacy violation. So the short answer is, inside the car, there are still self-imposed limitations by businesses saying, hey, it looks like a privacy violation because the current privacy laws in the web and mobile does protect the consumer. But when I am walking in the road and the self-driving car is actually capturing the data, it is public space. So they can claim that that's why they're capturing the data, but they could do a lot more with the data. If they capture the data, they can say, I see this person walking along in the street in Mountain View. They don't have a motivation to do that because this is a business and they're trying to make money, and their motivation right now is to get the car to learn to drive autonomously. But they have the power of the data that is sitting with them. The other day, I remember being out in a protest, and this was during the climate protest a while back, and the Waymo self-driving car was driving by, and I was thinking, this is now capturing a data of something people do naturally, being in a rally, being in a protest, and is the car going to think, anomaly, too crowded people today, or what is it going to do? But it needs to have captured that data too. But if it captured that data, now it has that information sitting in there, which is I would say a civil rights violation. And I have not heard this topic brought up. So I'm happy to follow up offline and see if somebody is working on it or whether we can do something about it. I'm really happy to follow up. I mean it.
That would be great, because that's an area that I am very much interested in, because privacy violation inside the cabin as well as outside.
Yeah.
And the other question is, what do you think about the transportation policies regarding autonomous vehicles? Where do you think it should go, and where is it now?
So I want to draw the line. I'm not a regulation expert, so I don't want to make things up, but I do. We have a course called AV Master Class online at Driverless World School, and I have this colleague who's an expert in regulation, David Kerrigan, who talks about this topic. And I've sat through webinars and spoken to people talking about transportation policy. And my understanding is it is still catching up. We do not have, transportation is today not focused specifically on the self-driving car because it's not mainstream available, right? They're not yet making it. So they are not ready to give a separate lane for the self-driving car to take off, because how can you justify the public good intent compared to everything else possible, right? You could give a bike lane, you could do other things to keep the road safe. So that's not taken off. But beyond that, there is legislation on driving safely, giving permit for new companies to drive. That's what the DMV is focused on. And the one good thing the DMV does, and I'm giving a very US-centered answer, so I don't know if your audience are global. We have various different state laws across the country, and the states compete with each other. And that's how it is today. And so in terms of the permit to come in and start driving, they just have different laws. And so Uber had an accident in San Francisco, and they got a cease and desist from our attorney general. They immediately said, we are going to Arizona. And then they were driving in Arizona for a long time, and then they had the accident in Arizona, and then they had to stop. So regulation is catching up. But what I'm seeing of the transportation department, and I don't know if that's where you're going with this question, is it is not just about the self-driving car. it is about mobility. We don't care whether it is a self-driving car. Maybe we will, and we are excited about it. But in the grander scheme of things, we just want to go to work. We want to shop. We want to move around, go meet our family, do whatever, right? We just want to be mobile. And so the idea of transportation is you want enough public transit options, you want enough shared mobility options. So the good things cities are doing, I wouldn't call this transportation policy, but cities are doing, where they're saying when you have the shared bikes and shared scooters, the micro mobility units, they are telling them, we will not give you a permit if you don't give us data. So they are getting data on where people are picking up the bikes and where they're dropping off. And then there is a legal battle going on whether the city can access this information, because city's intent is not to track you, but they want to make sure that they don't do some redlining and leave some neighborhood beyond. And one scooter company, which shall not be named, did do that and left the Tenderloin area out in San Francisco. And the city said, stop, you cannot be riding here and your permit is gone if you do not cover everybody equitably.
Yeah.
So they are using the data in a good sense. So in that sense, I'm a big believer that there is so much power in the data to drive transportation policy. And there are brilliant people in transportation departments, around the world, actually. I've sat in a panel in London similarly, and they're all thinking about, this is not just about one company or one business. A city is made of multiple people. How do we enable diversity? How do you have equitable access? And then people don't want to just drive the car or a bike. They want a combination, right? So finally, I don't care. I don't bike to Caltrain. I'm just making this up. I drive to Caltrain Park, right? And then I take the Caltrain and go all the way to San Francisco. And then I may take a lift from there and go somewhere else, right? So I just care about getting to this destination on time. So that concept is called multimodal transportation, which is picking up. And there is some collaboration with the rideshare companies and public transportation that is going on. So public policy, I think transportation department has their head in the right place, which is to serve the people, to get us equitable access, which I'm very optimistic about.
Great. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Sudha. Any more questions from our viewers today? Devalla, thank you for joining us. Ananya, if you have any questions for Sudha.
Ananya is actually my student from Stanford, so she's brilliant.
Yes.
She's a brilliant product manager. Yeah. So she knows this
Welcome, Ananya.
Yeah, it was an awesome class attended. I had a question around the federated AI.
Yeah.
So distributed cloud systems had a different purpose of scaling customer benefit.
Yeah.
Now this idea around federated AI and federated learning is more around democratizing some of these predictions and model accuracies for things like which is really to be regulated: banking, insurance, maybe healthcare. You said car.
Yeah.
How would you? I mean, what's the thinking around prioritizing the result of each of these models? Like, would all the models run for, say, US and Australia? How would they be distributed, and how would the result be prioritized? Is it like, in blockchain, we see a different way of decision making? So
very good question. So I want to rephrase the question to make sure I got this right. So you're looking at federated AI is actually, instead of the learning being stuck with one company or another company in a private model, now it is democratizing that underlying data is the concept, right? But the way blockchain does is blockchain is completely transparent. So you have this common blockchain that everybody is going to write through, and it distributes that at every step of interaction, right? Federated learning is about a model building. So it is not really distributing the data, it is distributing the learning. So one company has access to data and it is building a model. and the model is intelligent and can cater to a certain set of scenarios. The other company has a different set of models. So to your example of if we are learning in US roads and the car is able to drive in US roads, and then another company is working in Sweden and is building for Sweden roads, and a third company is building for Delhi roads in India, which is different, completely different. So if the company which is running here in California now wants to go to Delhi, they have to start all over again. So now each of their model is very good and running in their roads because that's what they're trained for. So now if they decide to build a federated AI model, federated learning model, then they could act, they don't need to share the training data from Delhi traffic or Delhi road signals or California's roads. It just takes that model and then they build this distributed machine learning model. So the combined model is going to have the intelligence which is fed by the data. So it's not really democratizing the data. It is democratizing the learning that came from the California roads, the Delhi roads, and the Sweden roads. And now the same car, which is running that model, is capable of running in these three scenarios. And barring this, I don't know how you can scale a self-driving car. Even between California and Detroit, I don't think the same car can drive today. And so we will need federated learning to just scale to drive in different road conditions, in different kind of local areas, and just expedite this learning. Otherwise, my prediction of getting to a driverless world is 2030. We're not going to get there if we do not collaborate and, the AV companies collaborate. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So to summarize, feels like
Anya, we are almost out of time, so we'll wrap this quickly. So
I just want to give it just a second for her to make sure that I've answered the question right.
Sure,
so yeah,
right. So essentially, optimize outcomes of models, whether it's for perception, intent analysis, or just other outcomes with diversity and other ethical considerations across the world.
That's right. So if there are ethical consideration that has been brought in from one team, then you could have that as a transferred learning, right? When you do transferred learning model, you're going to do it within your company, or you're essentially doing it in a global scale. So I hope it answers that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And there's one more person, Adivale, is that your name? Yeah.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. So maybe you're on mute or... Sorry, we're not able to hear you.
We can't hear you.
So if you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to follow up with each of you since...
Yeah, and Sudha is also part of the Data Ethics for All community. So we can also continue the conversation there, and you can find her on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out to her individually. I have one last question, Sudha, before we wrap this up. So according to researchandmarkets.com, the global autonomous cars market took a big hit and decline due to COVID from 24.10 billion in 2019 to 23.33 billion in 2020, which is almost a minus 3.19% decline. Also, Waymo and incubators of Uber, they've all announced that they're going to, suspend driverless vehicle testing, and it's put on cruise mode.
Yep.
On the other side, COVID really has helped, like autonomous vehicles have really helped with COVID situations in providing food and testing kits for frontline workers as well as for other people. So what are some bright spots for autonomous vehicles during the pandemic, and how do you see the future of this industry?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because this discussion cannot be complete without talking about COVID. It is very amazing because the self-driving car industry was building autonomous vehicles. Maybe it was used in agriculture and mining in a useful way somewhere else, right? What we were seeing mainstream was not getting to us as consumers. It was not getting to serve people. They were saying, we need to get to level 5. We are not quite ready. Then COVID hit, they had to freeze and stop. Now there is a whole revived interest in the industry, because the thinking is, hey, we want to go back to work. We want to transport people. And we can do this without a driver if the autonomous vehicle will drive itself safely, right? So Mayo Clinic is actually using autonomous vehicle from Navya to actually transfer COVID kits, test kits, right? And there's a whole bunch of transportation carrier options. So we have these autonomous bots, which are delivery bots. And there are these robotic systems which are also driving autonomously, which are helping clean the grocery aisles between people shopping. So there's a whole new set of innovation that's picked up. So the focus today seems to be on carrying things and people, and in a very safe way. More focus on carrying things, and not just there, it's also in the supply chain. So I'm seeing a revived pickup of that. And I would argue that this path to connectivity leading us to autonomous vehicles was already happening, was kind of in the plans. It just accelerated the connectivity part. So I would say this is an exciting time for us to get involved, to see what problems can we solve in this whole post-COVID world, when we are going back to work with some social distancing. And there's a lot of applications of autonomous vehicles that is coming, a lot of partnerships between city and delivery vehicles and retailers. So I would say the post-COVID, this COVID era autonomous vehicles is about not just the automotive industry, but every other industry. So if you're working in healthcare, working in retail, working in any other industry, I would actually, take a challenge and say, name any industry and I'll tell you how you can use autonomous vehicles there. So think about it as, from your industry, if you want to solve a problem in this COVID era, can an autonomous vehicle work on it? And my answer is yes. And you're going to build that.
Wow. That is an amazing future for autonomous industry and for AI data scientists and for data advocates like us all over the world. So here's your call to action. Get involved and start thinking of the next wave of autonomous vehicles and helping bring global revolution. Thank you, Sudha. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun. And people can join us on Driverless World School. We host weekly career pivot webinars and speaker sessions. I do this live Q&A periodically, everything about connected and autonomous vehicles. And come check it out. And I think this is a great time for anybody to pivot their careers and think about your responsibility on what you can do ethically with data. And Adewale, I'm sorry we could not answer your question because we couldn't hear you, but please follow up offline, and I promise to answer your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susanna, Adewale, and Ananya, to join us for this exciting conversation. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shilpi. Bye.
Thanks, Sudha. Bye-bye.